Welcome to the Kim B. Davis Show. Here we'll talk to the leaders in technology, culture, business, and the arts. We'll cover politics, advocacy, motherhood, writing, mental health, and mostly we'll focus on hope. Join Kim B. Davis, author, playwright, radio personality, event consultant, professional speaker on the Kim B. Davis Show. Good evening and welcome to the Kim B. Davis Show. I'm your host, Kim B. Davis, and this evening we have one of our favorite podcast guests. We have Dr. Angela Celeste May. She is our clinical, our organizational, our forensically trained psychologist. She is also the president of the Michigan Psychological Association Foundation Board. She's an author. She's a musician. And if you didn't know it, she is an awesome and amazing, accomplished woman. And we are so privileged to have her here tonight. And tonight's topic is understanding the value of Black culture. Good evening, Dr. Angie. How are you?
Good evening, Kim. I'm fantastic. Thank you. I'm doing very well and always so thrilled to be here with you again and enjoy some more wonderful, delicious conversation.
Absolutely. So let's get right into it. So we are talking about understanding the value of Black culture. Tell us how you would define what Black culture is so we can have a base point to have this conversation from.
Oh my goodness. Defining Black culture, there's so many aspects to it. I would say, like you said, to have a base point, Black culture is, you know what? It's an experience, it's a lived experience that helps to make the rest of the world whole.
Ooh, I like that. That's a quote. Say it again, Dr.
Yeah. It's the lived experience that makes the rest of the world whole.
And why
I
do
just,
you
I
say
just thought about that. That's true.
And that's amazing. And why do you say that?
I say that because, a lot of times when we think about the Black culture as Americans, we tend to view it from our own shores, being African American or Canadian American or whatever, within this continent, being Black folks here. And we know, or at least most of us hopefully should know, if we know our history, that our presence on this continent has by and large we're like the reminder of conscience. Our presence here is something that is constantly either pushing toward or we're kind of the thorn in the side of this country to become all that the founding fathers had indicated that this country should be and would be. So we're just the living embodiment of what we don't want to say how we fall short, but what is needed to be done to make this country what it purports to be. That's true for our country. You cannot have institutionalized ways in which you try to keep some folks out and some folks you can't do that and be truly the United States of America that it purports to be. And one way to tell if we're on the right track of that, if we're going towards that, is to look at the Black culture within our country. But a lot of us many of us have traveled overseas, many of us have not. For those of us who have not had an international experience of bumping into and interacting with our other members of our diaspora around the world, may not be as aware of this, but outside of our shores, outside of our country, I would say that that continues to be, that is the case around the world also. That it's like we're the conscience of the rest of the world as well. And that doesn't have to, it sounds like that has to do with like keeping folks down, keeping us down, or, and all that. Um, that is one part of it because that's part of the history. But this wonderful subject matter that you have today about the value of Black culture, it deals with the whole range. What we learn when we harm each other, meaning human to human, but also what we learn about ourselves when we lift other people up, when we learn from other people, what other people bring into this world that helps us all grow. So um, I think that's true around the world. One of the things I remember my dad used to talk about, he was a historian, and particularly for Black and brown folks, and he would say, uh, which we found fascinating because we weren't taught this in school. He would say, most of the world is brown. Like, yeah. I mean, all the colors from white to dark and everything in between is beautiful because God made us all. But having said that, the things that are special about Black and brown folks are special about Black and brown folks, and everyone gets to benefit from that specialness. So, yeah, I would definitely say that we're a barometer in many ways. Our culture is a barometer, and we help to make the rest of the world whole if we're all, including Black people, if we're all paying attention to that.
I love that definition. Now, I'm pivot a little
Okay.
because I want to talk about the George Floyd, Derek Chauvin. So, majority society saw that video, and for 9 minutes and 20 plus seconds, watch this man suffer. And a lot of people have said this moment galvanized for them many of the struggles, many of the issues that people talk about when we talk about police brutality. What? Because you just said, and I think that's phenomenal that you gave that example, that we're the barometer. Because many of us were angry, but we also had to keep in mind, I can't come out and react the way that I want to because I still have to work. I still have to live. I still have to function. Yet we saw around the world the mirror images of people who are not American. Some look like us, some didn't, who reacted with extreme anger. Like, how is this possible? And for some of us, and I'll say, namely me, I was like, wow, you guys are waking up to what is our reality. Not that on a daily basis that every Black person experiences this. However, there are many Black people who do experience this, and this is their reality. And the metaphor or the analogy of saying that Black people are the barometer, what is the temperature in this country? And so I'm going to ask you, what is the temperature in this country? Because we just passed Juneteenth as a federal holiday, which is
Yes.
a great thing.
Yeah.
However, it is not the end point in slavery, as many people have said. It was an end point in slavery in Galveston, Texas. We still have the John Lewis Voting Rights Act that is hanging in limbo. We have the anti lynching bill hanging in limbo. And African American folk are still being dynamic. You can look at the NBA finals and see that if you're watching, You can look at musicians, you can look at artists, you can look at business leaders in the community, you can look at political leaders. There's a guy, I can't even remember his name, but there is a new guy. He's an academic, he's a scientist coming out of Arkansas, and he has this dynamic campaign that he's running to become governor. So, Dr. Angie, with all of that in mind, tell us what the barometer is for what we see, and use the George Floyd case sort of as a a scientific model for it.
Um, I well, I will start my answer by addressing something that I learned that was learning for me, and that was learning about. And this is even recently. This has to do with the recent clashes, the most recent clashes between Israelis and Palestinians, and what was going on there. And I, personally, I am not a scholar of all that has gone on there. I do know that, as with many of us, whether folks want to accept it or believe it or not, the folks are cousins. Let's face the facts. Folks are sharing blood. Um, but there's a few different Palestinian groups of Palestinian and Palestinian Americans who have always been very outspoken and very, very, what can I say, committed to fighting with Black folks, and particularly Black Americans, for all the civil and social rights that we require and deserve and should have as full Americans. And I think the kinship is the word I'm looking for. I was listening and watching different Palestinian people talk about how they had always felt this kinship, because what they see happening, regardless of what side you fall on, politically and all of the rest, I think that personally, I think that the lives of Israelis and the lives of Palestinians are valuable human lives, regardless. They're all valuable human lives. So people can argue and disagree about who's running things, and who's in power and in charge of those things. But just the day-to-day on the ground, little kids, Israeli little kids and Palestinian little kids, they just know they're little kids. But getting back to this kinship feeling that I have, as I've understood it, that a lot of Palestinian people have felt, and particularly civil rights workers, what they have felt with Black people in America. I've heard them saying that is because we see our own struggle reflected in your struggle in general, our struggle in general, and specifically the George Floyd, that whole tragedy, that murder is what it is. It wasn't the first time, but maybe for a lot of us, it was more apparent than ever. So that kinship, as I was mentioning a moment ago, about Palestinians many have said that they felt for the Black struggle in this country, because it reflects themselves and some of what they have dealt with. When George Floyd, that tragedy happened, again, it was yet again another opportunity for many Palestinian people who had already been in like the civil rights struggle internationally as well as here. Once again, we're very much a part of those protests, and and the people fighting back and fighting for justice, not just for George Floyd, but for police brutality in general and police brutality against Black bodies particularly. So I wanted to start there because it does tie in that international part, that the fact that, and when I say barometer, it's both looking at where we are, like you're asking, in this country, but it also it's a way of one way of understanding where we are, in this world in general. And it's just like it's just like the more we can fight for democracies around the world, the more we can fight for Black people being able to stand up and have their voices. There are many places where they do, many societies where they do, but for those places where they may be considered marginalized, I think looking at Black people in those places around the world really can tell you a lot about where those countries and where those locations are in their temperature. Um, as well, yeah, in their temperature, and what people learn from watching us as also. Um, so I'm going to answer your question about where we are, but before I do, I also want to just add too. I think I told this story. I can't remember if I told this story about how when I was in South Africa back in 1996, and my friend and I, we were both doctorate students at the same time, and we had gone to South Africa for the seminar. And I told the story about the record, I think it was a record store owner, and he was telling us about how much they looked to us in our country for their fight to end apartheid, because the thought was, if they can do it, and they're only 10% of the population, then we know we can, kind of thing. And that's another part of that barometer metaphor that I used, that we, in terms of the value of Black culture, we inspire other Black cultures, but we also inspire non-Black cultures like the Palestinians. The women's movement in the 70s, they predicated much of the ways in which they fought on the civil rights struggle that came before. Same thing with LGBTQ. We are at the forefront of not just struggle, but what triumph can look like, and how we can rise all the way to the White House as a people, or at least one or two or three of our people, president, vice president, et cetera. So all of that is part of that barometer also. To your question specifically about looking at George Floyd and taking our temperature, I think, it's interesting. I would change your analogy slightly to answer.
Please do.
Okay, so what I mean is, when you take the temperature of a body,
Mm-hmm.
you come up with a number.
Mm-hmm.
So I would change your metaphor to looking at it in terms of the temperature being one part of the evaluation.
Okay.
So when you go in for a checkup, they take your temperature, they also take your blood pressure, and they take your blood, and they take, et cetera, right? So they do, it's a holistic thing. George Floyd's experience, and when I say his experience, it's really all of our, secondary trauma and all of that. I think that we need to look at it in terms of the same holistic approach that you take to evaluating a person or a body, from head to toe. So in terms of the temperature, definitely, temperature went way up. I'm adjusting my fan here. I do apologize. I'm turning it on and on. Yeah, temperature went way up, very, very hot on both sides. Hotter, I would say, on the side of those of us who are saying, just as you described, that's enough with this. We demand that this be over once and for all. We demand change, etc. But also on the side of those who want to try to fight. And when I say not as hot, what I meant was, I interrupted myself, I'm sorry. Not as hot on the side of those who might want to stand up for the Blue Lives Matter. Blue lives do matter. All lives matter. We definitely honor our officers and everything. But I think because George Floyd was a boiling point, as we've seen with other inflection points in our history and in our recent history also. Those who might want to stand up and say, well, you can't say that all officers are prejudiced. Well, that's absolutely true. All officers are not. but there is definitely seems to be something amiss
Mhm.
in the industry, in policing in our country that needs a closer look. So because it so much history gone behind it, because George Floyd was such an inflection point, a boiling point, and also because of where we've grown to, it's probably bad grammar, where we've grown to coming after um, Michael Brown, coming out,
Mhm.
all the things that have led up, having a Black president, having had that, having a certain level of conversation out loud with fellow white folks who think the same way and are not trying to pretend that we're all being treated the same when we're not all, having arrived at this point in our country has all given fuel to help tamp down the tendency that some may have to try to still pretend that there's nothing different there. Well, I mean, there are those who still try to, but in terms of taking the temperature just overall, we have too many white voices in power. Let's add that part,
Mhm.
who are acknowledging, agree with or disagree with policies and all the rest. But when our white president of the United States of America stands in front of the entire world and says that brutality against Black people needs to stop, that's all part of where we are in our conversation, saying it out loud, being heard a little bit beyond just ourselves and a few allies. It's so the temperature is way up for those of us fighting against that. Where it's also way up our igniting, I don't even want to say igniting, uncovering the white supremacy. How shall we put it? From a psychological perspective, delusion
Yeah.
that has always been here.
Mhm.
Um, I don't think it's naive to say getting that it has gotten better in certain ways. And what I mean by that is, I know people will say, changing the laws doesn't mean it's better, which is true, all true. But the reason I say it has gotten better, I think, looking historically, is because we do have, two and three, and in some cases, a fourth generation of younger folks who grew up not actually knowing beyond even reading a couple of lines in their history book. They weren't paying attention in school that day anyway, even knowing that any of their Black friends would ever be treated differently.
Mhm.
We had, so better in in that way. And the naivete is not good. They should know the history, absolutely. But their lived experience is one of, well, of course my Black friend can go where I can go. Why can't he? And these are teenagers and 20-year-olds talking, not our beautiful 4 and 5-year-olds who really get it. So in those ways, we have the temperature, we have the I don't know, the blood pressure. You're gonna go holistic, right? In those ways, I see things getting better in a certain kind of way, uh, as well. It's that's why I say the one temperature is not quite enough, because it's getting better, but in other ways, we have new and old fights to fight, because people have at the same time, as have become just the lid is just all off, just all the quiet parts being said said out loud, just like so. It's a really interesting place where we are, uh, and we have some really important choices to make. People say this all the time, and it's true that our democracy is at stake. The future of Black people, of Americans and Black Americans in particular, in terms of, are we going to have a voice, our voting rights? I mean, I used to say that when Jeff Sessions was in there, he was just mowing the lawn, getting that plantation ready to send us back where we belong.
Exactly. Sure
Get
was.
it ready. He couldn't wait.
Mhm.
Um, so it's, I mean, if I look at it in terms of like an assessment, of a body, and psychologically, and even physically, we the stressors, because both are really coming to a head, both sides. Those who want to like take us back to that plantation and take every right they can think of, as well as those who are pushing, and those who have joined the fight.
Mm-hmm.
uh, and we I don't want to use the word breaking point, and we're not at a breaking point, but I would say it's like someone who is psychologically stressed to the point where I wouldn't call it a psychotic break for the country, but I was going to say, when you get to the point where as lay people would say, a nervous breakdown, where you need bed rest, like because you just can't keep going this way. So one side or the other, it's just, and the Civil War was about,
Mm-hmm.
the ripping ourselves apart. Um, but I just thought of something as I was speaking. I said I would not call it a psychotic break. But I'm going to amend that, because one thing I've been saying as a psychological analysis is that for the most part, most of our brains are designed for growth.
Mm-hmm.
As we think, as we learn new things, as we have new experiences, our neurons in our brain they're firing, and we literally grow new synaptic connections, new neural connections, as we continue to learn things and take things in and grow and all that. Which is why it's not true that you get too old to learn. As long as something's firing, it continues to grow.
Mm-hmm.
I have said that, and I'm not the only one, of course, but I'm really seeing, in terms of the psychotic break, I'm really seeing a very dangerous, it's just very dangerous psychological game
Mm-hmm.
that's being played with people who don't know any better.
Yes.
Uh, because they're just being lulled into, don't use your brain. Just don't use it. We teach critical thinking
Mm-hmm.
in college. Some kids are taught it. We were doing, it wasn't called critical thinking, but in the households that we, a lot of us grew up in, where you talked about the things of the day and what's going on and how do you view it, how do you see it, the critical thinking. It's so important for growth on many, many levels. And there really is a dangerous psychological, like I say, it's a game. I call it a game because I think of the people pushing,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, again, the temperature of the country, of the people pushing the conspiracy theories, and why they call conspiracy theories, because uh, they lack facts
Mm-hmm.
that are well resourced and that can be followed to a factual conclusion. Um, I would say, and this is not based on science, this part, but I would just say from observation, there is a fraction of folks pushing this in terms of people in any power. Uh, we all have power in our society, of course, but people, officials and representatives, who might believe some of the stuff that's pushed. But we know, and I can say, be careful about saying we know, but I think that with investigation, we could probably conclude that too many people are pushing the conspiracy theories, the unfounded ideas, these concepts that require you to stop thinking. Too many are doing it for power. Many of them don't believe it themselves, and not all, but there are those who don't. There are a lot of people who were well trained academically, who know how to do research, know how to uncover, but they also know how to cover stuff up. And it's very sad and very dangerous that people are just following, just to their own detriment, just following along. Somebody tells you to drink bleach. There are those who actually did that.
Yes.
They're just poisoning themselves because they're being taught to not investigate for themselves. And the other thing too, I have to say, in terms of investigation, people don't know. They have to be taught. We were all taught this. Facebook is not a news outlet.
Exactly. Nor is
But
Twitter, nor is Instagram.
they're
Mm-hmm.
not, exactly. Are there some things on those platforms that are fact-based and they come from? Absolutely. But people don't know how to find that out, and all, as we know, all of that's being taken advantage of. People make things look like a news clip, so they think it's a news clip. So that's very dangerous psychologically, and for other reasons. But it's like with the body, the mind is the same. If you don't use it, it will atrophy, meaning that it gets weaker and weaker. And I won't say you totally lose the ability to use it. That can happen with the human body. But, we see it in our kids a lot of times. And in adults, it's so easy to be on that phone. It can suck you in, that fortunately we, come from generations where you went out and played at recess and, all that. And not the kids don't now, but when you have that as a background and a habit, sometimes it'll be hard to get back to it, but at least you have that foundation, to get back to. But this idea of just sitting without a screen, going for a walk, just enjoying, non being entertained constantly. It's good for the brain, healthy for the body, and all of that. And it's just, when you stop doing that, it's almost like you lose a certain kind of discipline. Like it takes discipline to sit for a minute. And if you're not used to doing that, it's like you have to redevelop that again. And that's what's happening with people who are living in this alternative bubble, who really believe that the president of the United States is not the president of the United States. It's really sad and dangerous and harmful. It's very, very harmful and very, very irresponsible for people who are perpetuating this, who know better. So the temperature is, now on the other side, since we're going to do a whole assessment, on the other side, in terms of what we can learn from Black culture, and looking at George Floyd as the example, one of the fortunate things is that in many ways we've been here before. The technology is new, maybe the way the information is passed along is new, perhaps, and therefore more rapid, and all of the rest. So there are new elements to this, but we are not new to fighting for our rights, fighting a certain kind of fight, and fighting on multiple levels. So because of that, we have something to build on. And again, so many people have used the tactics from Black culture, and particularly in this country, to help free themselves, because we have had to do it, multiple times in many different ways. So we are when we go back to pre-current technology, back to the Underground Railroad, we just, as you mentioned, talking about Juneteenth, and we're on the last day of Black Music Month and all that. When we go through our history, and I think that at a time when we are healing still and mourning and dealing with the George Floyd tragedy and all of the other, if we are tempted toward feeling like, because it can feel like, again, we're still fighting, I can feel that way. I find it so like, it just buoys you up as you think about what we've given, what Black culture has given to the world, the brilliance, the sophistication. I mean, pre-internet. If you talk about the Underground Railroad, the sophisticated way in which information was passed right in front of white slave holders, enslaved persons holders, right in their face. It just takes a lot of, strategery, sophistication to think it through, to have a lot of understanding on multiple levels, what it takes, how to go about, a lot of planning. All of that was done. And while there are many, many tragedies, there were many successes, to ultimately to the point of, our Juneteenth and having the legislation signed that we would no longer be enslaved. And then the fights that came after that. When I think about again, we build on shoulders. We have so many strengths that everybody looks to. And one of those is when I look at the civil rights movement and how many of them, did look at the kinds of things that we did in the Underground Railroad before, but also we know that Martin Luther King and not just Martin Luther King, but those who were really students of the nonviolent movement, looking at Gandhi and all that, just the power of that. There's a lot of strategic planning and all of that study and practice, all kinds of things that went into that. It's amazing to look at the ways in which people put their bodies in harm's way and did it in a way that ultimately, again, changed, made a shift in the country. So we have a Black culture in this country in particular. We have a long history of being able to force change. It may take time. It often does. But we're very, when we get together and we're determined, and our collective brilliance and talents and all of that, we're just like amazing. We get amazing things done, and we haven't stopped. We have not stopped getting amazing things done. So we will continue. We will continue, to see more positive change, and guys, steer this ship the direction it needs to go into. So yeah, we're at an inflation. It's like a lot going on. We have a lot of strengths to build on, but we have a lot that's being thrown at us. One of the things that Black culture is really taught and is because many of us do come from a collectivistic, tribal kind of mentality and background, as much as we have an individualist American attitudes as well, but we're very much, bring that tribalness with us. The strength of the United States of America, as people have said, on the international stage, comes from our allies, our locking hands together, our working with each other, and even sometimes working with enemies, or enemies on some fronts and some things we have in common on others. I don't know if anyone said that out loud. They may have. I think so much of that comes from the Black culture, even that also, because our strength, again, like the gentleman in South Africa said about us in this country, 10 to 12% of this country that we make up, and our language, our movement, the things we invent, just all that makes up Black culture is it's exported around the world and back, and everyone wants to be on that train. Everyone wants to be on that train, for legitimate reasons, for nefarious reasons. It's just I want permission to feel proud of the Blackness and all the specialness, just as I want everyone else to feel proud of their backgrounds, their culture. But when we say, hey man, where'd that come from?
Mm-hmm.
Where'd that come from? When people, two white young men at the office are like, oh man, that was great, high five. Where'd that come from?
Right, exactly.
The Moderna virus that's in my veins right now.
Yeah.
My sister, our Black scientist, so we just bring so much.
We do.
Yeah.
Brilliant as always. Brilliant as always. So you're going in the direction that I wanted to go. But before we get to that, I think it's very important that you said this a little while ago. They're saying the quiet parts out loud. We were taught, keep your thoughts to yourself. You don't whisper that out loud.
Oh my God. Yeah. They walk up to you now. Now they walk like, Kim, I want to kill you.
Right. And I'm like, huh?
What's and I'm gonna do it now. Wait, Kim, look, I have the plans.
Right. Right. You're going to be here on Thursday at 4:00, right? I'm like, yes. I sure am. I'm going straight to the authorities. You need to go and pick them up. But I also wanted to bring up the point, and my great grandmother used to say this when I was a kid. She used to talk about people selling snake oil. And so a lot of these politicians and people that are spinning these conspiracy theories and these as she would call them tall tales and conspiracy theories, whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to name it, if you cannot factually prove it or even show me something that points to it that's not convoluted, that's gonna make my eyes cross like, really? That's the best that you could do? I could have did better with that writing a story. Okay, come on now. But
Yeah.
you have a lot of people who are being grifted. They're being
Oh,
taken advantage of. They are being conned. And we know from history, there's a quote, a famous quote that says that if you can take the lowest white man and make him feel above the highest black man, I forget the rest of the quote, but essentially saying that white man will do whatever you want him to do against his own interests to keep that black man down. And a
mm,
lot of times we see that. And even with President Barack Obama, we saw that. Here we
ab-
have this Ivy League educated man who grew up in Hawaii. How many people do we know that actually grew up in Hawaii? Not saying that Hawaii is this foreign place because it's not. I've been there. It's
mhm.
gorgeous. It's
It
beautiful.
is.
But how many people can actually say, I know black people that grew up in Hawaii? And regardless of what his heritage is, he grew up in Hawaii. He was a community organizer. He married one woman, one,
And
had
stay married.
children, right, and stayed married and had two children by this one woman. No affairs, no any of the scandals that we normally see in politics. There was nobody in the bathroom tapping their foot. There was no phone call. There was no video. None of this.
None
There
of
was
it.
nobody in the white in the West Wing getting favors. There was none of that. None of that. There was nobody after dark trying to figure out how to get the tapes and pulling the record. There was none
There's
of
none of
that.
that. Wait, there was no call around to other countries. Give me some. Don't you want to influence
Dirt, right?
dirt?
They they had none of that. The worst thing they had was when he put on a tan suit, which every other president had put on, and everybody was up and having a huff. And I thought, really, is this what y'all mad at? But then we get the very next president who not only, and I can't even keep up. I think he's on number three, number four, but every woman he has left one and moved on to the next. Had children outside of marriage, and that's fine if that's your thing, that's your thing. But don't call yourself high values and morals because the Bible talks about one man, one woman. So,
Yeah.
if we're going to talk about morals, let's go back because what does the Bible say, Angie? The Bible says fools should be quiet or else you will let everybody know you're a fool. I forget what that scripture is.
Some along those lines. Yep.
Something
Yep.
along those lines. And so some of these people are just spouting stuff, and it's like, you are a fool. Are
Yeah.
you kidding me? And so, and it's interesting because you brought up the whole point of people walking up to you now with the game plan. So every day, there are videos of people who walk in Walmart, um, bakeries, restaurants. Why are you in here? The latest one I saw was in Walmart, and it was hilarious to me because this black guy looked like he could take this white guy. This white guy walked up to him. He was like, you black people got out of line. Y'all think y'all all that? Somebody need to put you back in your place. And he kept swinging at him, and the black guy was like, I'm just here in Walmart trying to get my prescription, and I'm trying to go home. I guess he didn't know that today that black people could come into Walmart. And the way he said it was funny, but we all know we've been places where people have stared at us, people have looked at us, some people have said things or, made gestures, made you uncomfortable, but you had to stand your ground.
Mhm.
Literally, not saying that you came up with a weapon, but that you had to not prove to other people that you belong there, but you conducted your business with
Mhm.
grace and class and went on about your business. It's funny to me because in popular culture, as you said, we'll do high fives. We'll say whatever the latest slang is. We'll
Yeah.
celebrate Black food, Black culture and dances, and, take whatever the dress or the mannerisms are and give
Absolutely.
it to people. There was a show a long time ago called Living Color that did the two snaps.
Oh
And
yeah.
now people everywhere doing the two snap, I always cringe when I see white women do it, because they'll be like, "Girl, give me the two snaps," and I'll be like, somebody should have told you that that's not appropriate."
They did.
Unless
Someone should have mentioned it. That's fine.
Right. Unless, we're really friends. But if you don't know me like that, don't do that. But what is it, or why is it, should I say, excuse me, that it's okay for you to take mannerisms, dress, the way people speak, yet on the other side, you look at people and go, but why are you here?
Yeah, exactly. You know, I love the way you framed all of that and asked that question. Because one of my, and I'm going to write about this. I need to do that. But there's this identity. There's an identity, and then there's the truth. The truth is, ah, all the rainbow colors of Black skin are beautiful. Black, kinky, thick, curly, straight, wavy, whatever we is beautiful. Oh my goodness. Black bodies, beautiful. Those full lips, beautiful. That's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be denied. You can pretend, you can lie about it, you can act like, oh, I don't care or whatever. But the truth is, and beauty is in the eye of the beholder. That is true. But I will say, just as scientists and psychologists and anthropologists have looked at what kinds of things are considered universally beautiful, generally speaking, evenly set eyes or whatever, that culture to culture, humanity seems to find, whatever. Whatever those things are, many of that is natural to Black people across the diaspora.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that is the truth, and you can see it's the truth by everything that we've been talking about and everything you just described. You must agree that all of these particular forms of beauty and beautiful sounds and the lilting way many of us speak, and not to stereotype. I think that's the other thing, that there are elements that are part of the Black culture that are uniquely African American or Black American culture. And then there are elements that are Black culture just across. And even if just to clarify, we're not talking about talking Black.
Right.
Quote unquote, because people are, pardon me, I have my earphone. People will speak of, well, you don't talk like a Black man, what people, the misnomer, because a lot of times people don't have the verbiage, they don't have the words to describe what they're trying to say. Oftentimes, it is not the use of a turn of a phrase as much as the style with which it, the way it comes across. It's those intangibles. And so, no, you don't have to move your neck in a certain kind of way, but it's those intangible parts that just kind of come through. So that the truth is, all those beautiful things that God gives gifts to everyone. And we've seen these particular sets of all these different kinds of gifts in many Black people.
Mm-hmm.
The lie is packaged, tied up with a bow, and sold to an American. And the lie is, in terms of identity is so powerful. We talk about back in the 80s, kids would just shoot each other dead over a pair of sneakers. It wasn't the sneakers. It wasn't the gym shoes. It was what it represented. And also it told you about what was lacking in here, internally. Identity is that's huge. What we saw in this country on January 6th had everything to do with identity. There's a truth to identity and there's a packaged lie to identity. The truth to identity is everything that God gave you that made you who you are, even as you're discovering who you are and growing and all the rest. The prepackaged lie that is sold generation after generation after generation in this country is that A, no matter who or what you are or how far or that you get in your life or don't get, to feel that your identity is intact, you need to have a Black folks under you.
Mhm.
That's just, it's implied, sometimes it's said outright. It's just, weaved, unfortunately, through the culture.
Mhm.
Black people are less than, not as smart. Did you hear the latest about the NFL?
No, what happened?
Okay, the NFL. I had to look this up. I don't. I just remembered it. I don't have the actual term, but you'll find it. Just Google.
Okay.
This is current modern day, like literally a couple weeks ago, like earlier this month.
Okay.
And they were talking about how the NFL came out and said that they would no longer, they were going to stop this practice that, most of us, like, we didn't know that they had this practice. Some term, I don't remember, but it's a practice in the NFL in which they had to do with hiring player. Oh no, I think I know what it was. I know what it was. It was lawsuits,
Mhm.
lawsuits against the NFL, the franchises for head injuries as a result of playing football on a professional level.
Mhm.
And this part I might not have quite straight, but it had something to do, I believe, with the payouts of lawsuit monies for the victims who had suffered long-term head injuries from playing in the NFL.
Okay.
And the practice that they had in place, I believe this is correct, was something along the lines of they consistently would pay less out to Black players, Black
Mm.
retired players as compared to white players, because of this idea that Black players were already not as cognitively sharp or smart as the white players.
Mhm.
So it made it harder to prove that. Well, how do we know that the bang of the head had anything to do with why they're having trouble with concentration or anything else? Because they're not as smart. And this was like, I don't think it was May. I want to say it was early this month, but in either case, or as the old folks used to say, irregardless. Irregardless. That's mighty reason. Like, that's right. Where's my calendar? That's right here. That's like, yes. Really? I mean, I don't, and what I'm not recalling, I didn't hear all the details. I heard some of the reporting on it. Uh, um, so I don't know if it was a written policy that was hidden or just word to word policy, but it was a thing for quite a long time in the NFL that this is what this is based on. We don't want to really pay out because Black players are just not as smart. So yeah, that whole to answer your question, I think that it's okay. It's really not, but it's okay, quote unquote, to try to steal and hijack and even if we give credit to my best Black friend or whatever, where I got this from, it's okay to want to take all that stuff, because the truth is we all know that stuff's cool. I want to be like that. That's great.
Mhm. Mm.
But it flies in the face of the lie, which is, well, we can appreciate that good music and all, but you know, and then again, I always want to say that for 4 years into the future, 3 years, when they look at this show and say those two women are lying. This is obviously not all. Of course, it's not all. But sad, and that's not all white people, and by any stretch of the imagination. But unfortunately, it's very pervasive. These kinds of ideas, and there's ranges. There are ranges. There are people who are very sincere, have fought that good fight along with their Black brothers and sisters, and I mean seriously, like put their careers on the line and everything else, but started itching when their child wanted to, marry somebody.
They
And
sure
then
did.
there's those who don't, which is cool. So there's a range.
Mhm.
There's a range, but it's very pervasive. It's very pervasive. So yeah, I think At what point is the identity? And then there are those who say, you know, wow, it's again the value of Black culture, what we've given, just like with George Floyd. We make people look at themselves.
Mhm.
We really and a lot, you know, some people fight it tooth and nail. George Floyd really helped a lot of people wake up. A lot of people recognize all this talk of privilege.
Mhm.
When we tried to speak in terms of privilege prior to George Floyd, some heard, some didn't. Well, can you really prove it? You know, um,
Mhm.
but that tragedy really woke a lot of people up to the privilege that they really have. Began to recognize them in certain ways. Um, even to the insurrection, where there were lawmakers who talked about how they were telling each other within the chamber when they were being breached, take your pen off. And it was the one gentleman in particular, I can't remember, the congressman or senator, congressman, I can't remember, who said, you know what, wow, it really hit me, my privilege, because my colleagues can't take off their identification as, you know, a Black congressperson or whatever. So, Kim, if I may, may I utilize your platform to just for
Yeah.
a little added education? Thank you, because um, this will just be real quickly, and this has to do with, like we were saying, a lot of times people don't know what to look for. They
Mhm.
don't know how to get out of that bubble. They don't, you know, so just a couple of quick things for your audience.
Mhm.
Think about to help educate them as to how to track if something is likely maybe a conspiracy theory or maybe not true, or how to find the how to find it's true. One thing is that I would want to tell people is look at the history,
Mhm.
consider the source, and look at the history. So that means who is telling that to you? Who's telling you the information? A lot of people are turned against the media because the media. People need to understand that there's different kinds of media.
Mhm.
News outlets, more than likely, the news outlets that you can trust are the ones who have a long track record of reporting things as they are. And that may seem harder to find in this day and age, but for the most part, generally speaking, your old local stations, Channel 2, Channel 4, DI, Channel 2, Channel 4, and Channel 7, NBC, ABC, they oftentimes, your local news will often, there may be some slant, but generally will just report it as it is.
Mhm.
NBC, as I think of them nationally, and CBS, actually all three of those big ones, they have their national wing,
Mhm.
and they many people may not know this. They go back decades and decades and decades, to the 40s and 50s when they're on the radio and everything. So they have a long track record. They don't always get it right, but their mission is to just tell it like it is, not to just sell you one slant or one another. So look at how long they've been around and look at their track record. You can look that up in history and stuff like that. And then another thing too is a lot of people don't realize this who are not in journalism. Journalists actually have laws and rules they have to follow when they're reporting. So there's a difference between someone who gets on the camera and just gives their opinion about stuff.
Mhm.
Tucker Carlson gives his opinion. We can give our opinion. Those are called editorial comments. We
Mhm.
have editorial pages in the newspaper. You have it on TV where you can give your opinion.
Mhm.
And then you have journalists who are required. They can get in trouble. They can get their company in trouble. They can lose their license if they're reporting things that are not, true to the best of their ability. So look at how long the reporter or the company has been around the station. Look at their track record, and you could and look if they're journalists just telling what's happened, and those who are just giving their opinion. And you also can go a little further, and you can look these people up, and you can see some of their individual backgrounds. And so some of that can help
Mhm.
also. And if and one other thing too, if they give you resources, if they say on their article and you're reading it on Facebook, and then you say, well, this came from someone who said someone who said someone. Maybe true, may not. So look at things like maybe the Wall Street Journal, which may or may not, depending, maybe the New York Times, maybe the Detroit Free Press if you're in Michigan, wherever your state, whatever country you're in, if you're able to access some of those.
Mm-hmm.
And in our country, public, what is it? PBS in our there's
Public
national
television. Mm-hmm.
public radio and TV stations around the country. Oh, and CNN,
Mm-hmm.
not CNN, C-SPAN.
Yeah.
CNN's cool too.
Mm-hmm.
C-SPAN just gives it to you
Mm-hmm.
straight
Mm-hmm.
down the line. So yeah, just some things that people look at because they don't. When you and I say, oh my goodness, they don't get on Facebook, but people don't know. They don't. They don't.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and Snopes. I'm
Yes.
not advertising for anybody, but Snopes.com, Snopes.com. They are a company, as you know, who that's what they do. They fact find, they follow trends, particularly things that are on social media and Facebook, to find out is it true, how much of it's true, and they report it out. And so those are some trusted sources.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Because that is correct. Because there have been some times when people have posted things on Facebook. And I'm like, And then I'll go on Snopes and it'll say this article popped up. It came
Exactly.
from such and such. It's not true. There is no factual base. I,
Exactly. And they'll tell you why. They'll
mm,
tell you why. And so that you can go and follow it and read it and see for yourself. Yes.
mhm.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times I know that people find their news on Facebook because that's their primary social media. But I would add, in addition to everything that you've said, if someone says that they saw it, if I said I saw something and I said I got it from Dr. Angie and Dr. Angie got it from C-SPAN, go to C-SPAN to
There you go.
see what C-SPAN said.
That's
Because
right.
just like anything, and I'll use this example because I always think it's funny every time I see it. So my kids are a little bit older, but
Mhm.
they loved when they were smaller Madagascar, Escape to Africa. And there's a scene where they're trying to escape, and the little animals are all dangling like a ladder. And
Mhm.
so they tell the plan, and it goes down the line. And by the time it gets back to who they need to get it to, it's totally changed. And you're like,
Totally.
what? We laugh about it and think it's funny, but that's what happens. You know,
Exactly.
someone could have something bad could have happened to someone. You could be
Mhm.
relaying that story, but then there could be details that you saw or
Exactly.
details that you thought you saw or just inferences or whatever, and you add it to the story.
Exactly.
And then the next thing you know, you've totally changed that story. And people are like, but Kim, that's not what happened. He just walked across the street and the car hit him. Well,
Right.
you didn't see it like I saw it. Okay, well, we can't talk about how you saw it. We want to talk about what happened.
Exactly. And that's so true. Psychologists have found that eyewitness testimony can be troublesome because different people interpret what they're seeing in different ways based upon their own background, what they may have been going through that day, all kinds of things. So it's not always that people are purposely trying to mislead, but just as you described, we add things not realizing it. We make assumptions and add to the story. So, and the other thing is, this tells you a lot about where you are personally. It's important to ask ourselves questions, and well, am I being fair?
Mm-hmm.
That's important. It's important for you and your kids, all of us. It's important to treat others as we want to be treated, like the Bible says, the golden rule. So if I hear something about one of my favorite politicians, my first inclination is, nah, I don't believe that. Nah. But because I want to be fair and I want to be knowledgeable,
Mm-hmm.
and because I know no one's perfect,
Mm-hmm.
after I say, I don't believe that, let me go look it up.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I may find that as I've gone back to the source or where that came from, and so look from trusted, I may find more and more information. It's like, oh wow, I have to acknowledge, oh man, I wish he didn't do that. I don't agree with that. I have enough moral integrity. I'm not perfect, but I feel strong in my own moral integrity to say, I feel that that's wrong. Now, I should learn more about what happened, or but so far I have to say, I just really admire him so much, or her, but I don't agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
To have the balance to be able to say, I don't agree with that. Let me find out what that's, what's going on. And occasionally upon finding out even more and over, if it's some track record or something, I have to say, maybe I have to refile them in my own, whether I file them now. And the other thing too is along the same lines, just like you said, if Dr. Angie said blah, 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 and she said she got it from C-SPAN, and then you can go back and find out for yourself. If you found out something that I got wrong, that coming back and telling me, hello, people, that's being a friend. Like Kim will come back and say, remember you said blah, blah, when I looked it up and they said, and because I want to learn, I know I'm not perfect. I can make mistakes. And I don't want to be irresponsible and put false information out there. I'll thank Kim like, oh man, really? I didn't see that. Where did you see that? Oh, wow. I didn't even realize that, So I guess we also want to say, don't be afraid to be wrong about the one you admire or to say that maybe, oh, wow, maybe they're not what I thought, but don't do that to yourself, to shut your brain down and diminish your own, strengths by handing yourself wholly over to somebody because you feel that they are your champion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So I found this to be fascinating. So I just learned, I don't know if you saw the articles that have come up. James Baldwin did an interview on ABC's 2020 when it debuted, and or in its initial stages. I shouldn't say debut, but in its initial stages. And ABC buried it because they didn't think it was that good. And so I want to read to you a quote that James Baldwin said, because people are talking about this interview and the observations that he was making and how relevant it is to today's time. So James Baldwin says, and I quote, white people go around, it seems to me, with a very carefully suppressed terror of Black people. A tremendous uneasiness, Baldwin said. They don't know what the Black face hides. They're sure it's hiding something. What it's hiding is American history.
Wow.
What it's hiding is what white people know that they have done and what they like doing. White people know very well one thing. It's the only thing they have to know. They know this, everything else they'll say is a lie. They know they would not like to be Black here. They know that
They would not like to be Black
here in America, I believe is what
okay.
they say. Yep. They know that, and they're telling me lies. They're telling me and my children nothing but lies. And I thought that was powerful because we're having this debate about critical race theory.
Absolutely.
And someone said, why are we calling it critical race theory? I get that you need to label it. However, we're trying to tell history from an accurate perspective. We're trying to include all of history. And if you are fighting critical race theory, then you must be fighting telling the entire story of our American story, which includes Black people and their sacrifice, accomplishments, and contributions to this country.
Yeah. I had 2 to 3 thoughts at the same time. What else I think, which do I mention? Well, first of all, it speaks volumes that, because we know Baldwin, every time he opened his mouth was like, wow. It speaks volumes that James Baldwin's interview was buried because they didn't think it was that important or didn't think it was that good, or perhaps I have a suspicious mind that they buried it because that was, were
Now,
people not ready? Perhaps they weren't ready.
it's possible, but in the article, and I'll pull up the article and I'll send it to you. In the article, the execs at ABC were quoted as saying he is a washed up has-been writer or author.
Oh yeah. Oh no, I have no doubt that they said that, and they may even have felt that. But if you have someone who walks up to you. Well, okay, let's change it. If you have a parakeet who never had a big author career, parakeets can have author career, but this particular one doesn't. So if a parakeet like lands in front of you and opens his or her mouth and starts saying some wholly uncomfortable truths, you're going to decide, oh, we need to retire that bird. Oh, so I have no doubt that that's what they said. And they may even have believed what they said. They may have actually believed he was old, washed up, blah, blah, blah. But a couple of things occur to me. Number one, you knew where he was in his career, where he was when you booked him. Why did he become washed up after he spoke? So there's that. There's that. Secondly, he could be washed up and therefore, they thought that no one wants to, what he has to say wasn't important. But regardless of all of that, that was, and that was quite some difficult for, I imagine, a lot of folks to hear. And the other thing too also is, how when we watch journalists and, actually any place that we are, again, what we give to Black culture, whenever we watch a news program, and we'll have the one Black journalist on, or we'll have a couple of Black experts on, whatever they're talking about. Let's say it's politics, whatever the case may be. I know for myself how many times, like my husband and I'll be like, "Ooh, I'm so thankful that particular person was on to highlight and bring forth the elephant in the room, about, how this is impacted by Black people and it's on all the rest." Which, more often than not, we miss when one of us is not, one or two or three of us are not in the room to highlight that for people to, to recognize. And so we give that to every profession that we're in, like everywhere we show up. So James Baldwin was definitely, he was being James Baldwin. He was, saying some difficult things, especially in that time. But then to what he said, that we are, that's what we've been talking about. We are, the walking history. We are kind of like in their face. I imagine that's not comfortable to hear. Who wants to hear that? But we need to, it's uncomfortable. And there are people who are embarrassed. There are people who are angry because they want to forget it. I totally understand all that, but we just continue to, and I mean all of us collectively in this country and elsewhere, what affects one affects us all, whether people recognize that or not. So we need to reckon with it. We need to deal with it, or otherwise it continues to harm all of us. Because this country would have been harmed, and I'm forgetting her name, which is terrible. The doctor who helped create one of the Moderna virus. Moderna vaccine.
The vaccine, yeah.
Yeah, the vaccine. We, as an example, we would all be harmed if she weren't, someone else may have done it, wonderful, but, without her input, so every place we show up, we reflect, just like James Baldwin said, we reflect the history, both in the past, because history deals with the past, but also the lived, here and now. And what do you have that? Do you have it in front of you? What was the last part of what he said? About what was the last part of what he said?
He said they know that everything else they'll say is a lie. They know they would not like to be Black here. And he uses the word here. They know that, and they're telling me lies. They're telling me and my children nothing but lies.
Definitely lies, yeah. Wow.
Powerful. I believe that was in the 70s.
Yeah, yeah, very, and it's a truth that was not new in the 70s. We knew it in the 50s. We knew it in the 20s. But his boldness in saying it, to be able to say that out loud, and it's like very, very powerful, very, very important. And getting back to your original question about the temperature and where we are, again, we're at this like inflection point, because I keep using that word, because we're at a time where CBS digs that back out,
Mm-hmm.
or that the reporter that they put that out there, and we are better. We, meaning the broader country, are better able to sit and look at it. Every single person isn't on an individual basis, but generally speaking, like you said, we're having these conversations that we've needed to have for a long time, and that's just the beginning of any kind of healing. You've got to tell the truth. You got to reckon with that and give it light. So yeah, I just want to
What?
I want to ask you what James Baldwin was talking about is white fragility.
Mm-hmm.
And are you familiar with the author of there's a book, White
There's a
Fragility?
book called White Fragility. I have not had the opportunity to read it. I have talked to a couple of people who have read it,
Yeah,
and they talked about it's a powerful read. So,
yeah. And I too need to read it as well. The same author, is it Robin DiAngelo? I think that's her name. Professor. She has a new book out now as well that I think is just coming out. It's something about nice racism, or some term that really speaks volumes, something along those lines. So yeah, it again, seeing what we deal with, seeing how we fight, what we give to Black culture. Again, I don't want to say that no one would move if we weren't, but how much more so does a Robin DiAngelo, who wrote the book, how much more so uh, does she take her strength to be able to put that out there as a white person? Because we need to hear from white folks. We need to hear it from all around, because it's the truth and it's powerful. How much more emboldened has she been to be able to write that, because of everything you named about what we've given, our strengths, the way we fight, for really the rights of in this country, an American, and universally just human rights.
mm-hmm.
So it needs to be written about, it needs to be talked about, all of that, all of that, and keep pushing to make those differences. And just George Floyd and all the other names that need to be said. There's to see their sacrifices not for nothing. Uh, it's so and sacrifices of so many who came before and are still pushing and dealing with loss that is unfair loss. I don't know if there's such thing as a fair loss, but that loss that perhaps didn't have to be, if people could wrestle their identities to the ground and perhaps get back up with some hug some truth, and just embrace, and we keep having these kinds of conversations. So, but yeah, there's just countless ways that Black culture has influenced, I think, and I know, and we feed everyone, we feed the world, and it's important for us to feed ourselves too, because unfortunately, part of Black culture has been, um, in some ways, understandably, I hate to say that, but we have turned on ourselves, torn each other down a little bit. Some of that comes from, feeling attacked. And again, part of the American identity is to put a Black person down, elevate all that makes them who they are, but then put the individual down. And unfortunately, we take that on as well, psychologically and emotionally. So that's something that's more good news, I think, in what's happening today. Um, Initiatives that have been around for a while are really taking hold. This whole buy from Black business, support Black businesses. I'm loving seeing that. I'm loving hearing that. As a member of my sorority, I'm on a committee in which we are supporting Black businesses everywhere. And that's so important. That is so important for entrepreneurship, for growth, the community growth, and also just psychologically and emotionally. We need to continue to work to get away from this idea that, if it's Black owned, it's not of an amazing caliber.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those, there's good news. There's good news. There's good news. And we have a Black vice president.
Yes, we do. And she's the dynamo, and we are extremely proud of her. We are extremely proud of our former president, President
Yes.
Barack Obama and the
Yeah.
First Lady Michelle Obama, just dynamos.
And
It,
our other public servants as well, Martha
yes.
Fudge, and
Hmm.
just, so many who are serving in this administration and who've come before. Absolutely. The Shirley Chisholms and all those folks.
As you said, we continue to rise and
Yeah.
we continue to rise and we do
And
it.
we continue to teach. We
Yes,
continue to teach the rest of the world. We continue to rise.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Thank you, Dr. Angie. This was a fun and fascinating and informative conversation.
It
Of course, we
was. It
always
was.
learn so much. So, but before we go, we have to ask you, okay, tell us about your books, your movie. You got a movie, you have music. What else
Yeah.
do you have going? Tell us about everything going on for Dr. Angela Celeste May.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for asking. Well, okay, we'll start with the psychology side. I'll say first company I founded was psychology. Was my company with my sister. So there's A.M. May and Associates Incorporated. That's the company I am president of and founded with my sister Michelle May back in 1996 when I was a doctorate student, young doctor. Uh, um, we do consulting and we do coaching. Um, both for the consulting side, I do more of I do the consulting in terms of with companies, small and large, both for profit and nonprofit on a variety of issues in terms of helping them do what they do best. Um, so that oftentimes that does mean dealing with human capital. I hate to use that term. Dealing with how individuals within particular companies work with each other and how they work with their customer and all those things. So whatever their particular issue is, I do that as far as consulting is concerned. Both my sister and I do coaching. We do personal and professional coaching. Um, we're both professional musicians, so we also do creative coaching as well. So if you're a creative professional and you're needing some support, some help with how to move forward on a creative project or whatever the case may be, it doesn't have to be in music. It can be if you're an author, artist of any kind. Our coaching includes that also. And for me in particular, I also do doctoral coaching. So if you're a doctorate student, you're on your dissertation journey and you need some support, some help coming up with everything in the doctoral dissertation is based, in terms of your research, is based on the question, the research question. And it's amazing the work, it can take weeks to really hone that down because a lot that goes into that. And this is the beginning of, everything else. So I can help with that and other elements as well of the doctoral journey. So that's our company, AMA. You can go to AM as in Mary, MAY, May, AMA associates.com just for our website, and contact either of us if you want interested in coaching. We also have offered counseling in the past. We will be offering that again later this year, probably in the fall. So keep an eye on that. So that's my company, AMA and Associates. We do podcasts. We do lots of things. So come to our website, find us on Facebook, find us on Instagram, so you can keep track of all the different things that we're doing. We're doing retreats. We do retreats for professionals, all kinds of stuff. So that's that. That's that. Staying with the psychology part of what I do, as you mentioned, I'm currently the president of the Michigan Psychological Association Foundation Board. And thank you for sharing that. I'm very, very excited that this year we've just given our second annual dissertation diversity scholarship grant. So we offer a $2,000 grant to a doctoral student of color. This is the second year in a row that we've done it. I was able to spearhead this in the direction that we're doing it last year when I was the chair of the committee, and this year I'm the president. So we're very, very excited about that. If you go to Michigan Psychological Association, go to that website, and then go through the table of contents and you'll find the foundation. You'll find more about our foundation and what we do. Community members can participate even if you're not on the board. So check us out for that. So we're very excited about that. Let's see my book Freedom. The M is cut off. Freedom. What is the experience of living without negative self-imposed limitations? That you can find that at Ex Libris. That's an X, LIBRIS.com, Ex Libris. I did have it at Barnes and Noble, but I've got to, I've got to restock them. Got to read because people bought them. But basically, it was my master's thesis, and I did research into resiliency and what helps us, us meaning all kinds of people, men, women, people of different ethnic backgrounds, different ages from the 20s into the 60s and beyond, like 65, 70 in my research. And found some themes that seem to be fairly universal, at least, that many people can draw from, about how we can go from feeling stuck, whether it's in our personal lives, in our career, just emotionally stuck in some ways. However you may define stuckness, to travel from that to getting to freedom, free from that, and to be able to better thrive. So do pick up my book. Many people have said that they found it very, very, very helpful and enlightening. I based a 5-week workshop at Oakland Community College District based on my book. I've shared it at Chicago State University and just, different places, and people always get a lot from it. So do support. On the music side, I am the president and founder of Celeste Productions Incorporated. So I've been a musician all my life, professional musician since I was 16. But since I founded the company, under that, I put everything under there. So I teach voice and I teach piano. And voice is my number one instrument, flute is my number two, and then I play violin and viola and other instruments. So I teach, I produce and create music videos. If you go to my YouTube channel, I've just hit 1,000 subscribers. I'm very excited. Yay. Yes, I'm excited. So my YouTube channel has primarily music related stuff. So I have a vocal quick tip series, and I've got a good, I think 51 videos or something, and which it's a really good series if I do say so. It deals with a lot of different things of using our voice. If you're a singer, but even if you're not, if you're a public speaker, a storyteller, any of that. So it hits on using the voice. It also hits on, if you're a musician of some kind, some of it's valuable, even if you're not using your voice for music. So yeah, I create videos. You'll see my music videos there, including my last one that I did where I had the Detroit Youth Choir join me. So you'll check that out on the song that I wrote called Listen Up. And I have 2 CDs. The first one's called No Limits. Second one is called Reintroducing the Lady. You can find Reintroducing the Lady on Amazon. And you can find both the first and second album on cdbaby.com. And you also can buy individual singles if you like from Reverb Nation, REVERB Nation.com/Angela Celeste May. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm putting a project together, musically speaking. I'm not gonna say too much about it, but I'm very excited. I'm working on this project, so I'll get back to that. So that's some of what I'm doing. Some of what I'm doing right now. A lot of what I'm doing. You can find me on Twitter at CELESTEMUS1. So it's Celeste and then MUS, short for music, and the number 1 on Twitter. And then every place else, just look up Angela Celeste May or Dr. Angela Celeste May. YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of that. So that's some of what I'm doing right now.
Excellent, excellent. You're always doing something amazing and wonderful. So we want to make sure that people know so that they can follow you and see all the great things that you do. But thank you again for being on the Kim B. Davis Show. We so appreciate you. And we can't wait until next month when we have another exciting discussion.
Yes, cannot wait. I'm sorry, I didn't have a song for you today.
Well, for next month,
I'll be ready.
Because in July, it's my birthday. So, I'm accepting gifts all month long. So a song will be wonderful.
Yes, yes, yes. I will do that for both of our birthdays. Yes, in July. With a lot
Absolutely,
of people.
absolutely. Thank you guys for tuning into the Kim B. Davis Show. You know, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Snapchat, TikTok, and everywhere else I am. Bachelor is spelled Batchelor. So it's Kimberly Bachelor Davis. You can see this show on YouTube at youtube.com/Kimberly Bachelor Davis. You can also listen to this show on Apple, Spotify, Google, and Stitcher. You can find out more about me as an author at www.kimbdavis.com. Thank you again for tuning in, and we hope to see you on the next show. And as always, remember, be magnificent.